You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
The world is coming undone. Imperial flags reign across the galaxy.
Can you be trusted without your shackles?
Let's just get this over with, shall we?
We've a mission for you. A major weapons test is imminent. We need to know how to destroy it.
If you're really doing this, I want to help.
Good.
Good. I've been recruiting for the rebellion for a long time.
We destroyed our home. I fight the Empire now.
I fear nothing. All is as the Force wills it.
The captain says you are a friend. I will not kill you.
Thanks. There isn't much time. Every day they grow stronger.
There is a 97.6% chance of failure. He means well.
This is our chance to make a real difference. Are you with me?
All the way.
Oh, that looks fun.
Good morning, everyone. Hey, Chris.
Good morning. Hey, welcome back again we're back to school with All Things 3D.
Yes, in fact, we have a special guest today, special guest crasher.
We do.
It's Noah, correct, from Onshape.
Yeah, hi there. Noah Flaherty, working at Onshape here. Glad to join you guys.
Yep, so we're going to have you on about 10 o'clock, and, you know, as Chris has been talking about before the show, he's been a huge fan of Onshape. We've actually had, God, I can't think of his name now, but we had somebody else on Onshape when you guys first introed last year. And
Very cool.
Since then, we both tinkered with it, but I guess I'm kind of a Fusion 360 guy. Yeah, so Chris has kept up the the other side of the wall so that we have something.
Good. Well, we've come a long ways in the last year, that's for sure.
Yep. So,
okay, Chris, what do we got going on?
Well, you know, as usual, Friday program. Today is August 12th, 2016, and obviously, you know, Fridays we run through the news and what happened in the week, and we've got a lot to cover, obviously, because we took the big summer break, so, you know, maybe we'll even throw in some items, you know, that maybe we missed while we were gone. And but today, I mean, we've got lots to talk about. Obviously, our VR section. Mike wants to tell us all about this new Samsung, something to do with Samsung's new diamond technology. Never even heard of it, so I can't wait to hear about that. HP's made some moves in the 3D scanning market, and as usual, you stick around to the end, and the Printwhisperer is going to give you some more tips on how to get a 3D printer at your school.
Cool. The Printwhisperer, whisper. I'll have to add a reverb to that. All right, so first, on to our main topic of the day, and that's what we're going to be talking about, this cool little artwork. Could you imagine having this in your room? I think I'm going to create a little VR room with this pattern.
So I'm just guessing, is this has to do with, like, because this looks kind of similar to, like, the Retina display. It obviously is RGB, so I'm kind of inferring here that this has something to do with the display technology.
It does. Essentially, you know, you mentioned it was new. Actually, it's new old. The diamond pentile process has been used for a while. In fact, all the way back to the S4, and I'll get into a moment on why this is important.
So if you zoom way into your screen, this is what it looks like?
Well, into an AMOLED screen. So let me go ahead and get right into, let's see, I've got a, here we go, subpixel rendering. So yes, you are correct. In order for us to perceive a particular color, we break it down into, normally it's RGB components, red, green, and blue. And for a long time, LCD was king because they could shutter basically a color filter, red, green, and blue, with a white light source behind it. In the old days, it used to be cold cathode. In the newer days, it is now white RGB light. So when you hear the term LED backed LCD, well, that's what they're referring to. You've got a white LED behind the display. CRTs and LEDs, and let's see if I can bring up this little picture here so that you can see it. CRTs, if you remember back in the old days, you know what a CRT, Chris, is? I think you're...
Barely. Yeah,
barely.
Of course I remember. That was what we had when we were kids.
Okay, but a CRT, or cathode ray tube, was actually a tube, a vacuum tube with a phosphor front, and the pattern looks something like what you see on the left here, and it's called the TV CRT. Notice it is phosphors of red, green, and blue, and they're like stripes. They could also be, as they show next to the PC CRT, round. If you notice, the round ones would allow you to actually show more pixels or subpixels within the same range as a TV CRT, which kind of makes sense because a lot of PCs required a very dense or high resolution. So they would be smaller, but more importantly, the definition here, round versus slotted. And then if we get into X01 LCD and LCD technologies, notice again we went back to those little stripes. Well, the problem with this is that these stripes are not what's the word I'm looking for, equal distance for the actual subpixel. But the other important thing is that it is actually 3 components. Now what they have found out is that, as you're probably aware of, our eyes are sensitive to certain color spectrum. In fact, green being the most sensitive, and this is what you saw in your actual TV, is that they, in order to compress the color information, they mainly use green to contain the black and white, which is normally what our eyes are more sensitive to begin with, and then red and blue got less information because our eyes didn't have the same amount of bandwidth for those color spectrum. So they literally reduced that color spectrum in NTSC, which is your normal TV signal, and I think it still carries on today in some form or another, like this program you're watching now, in order to provide a compression technique. So we just have the green, red, and blue. So let's jump back to our pen tile for AMOLED. This is a pattern. Notice that we're using a similar process in an AMOLED screen, large, red, and blue, and this makes sense because since we're less sensitive to these, we make these larger so that they equal the brightness of green. So this is what's cool, is because when they do that, they can make these larger red and blue, which only take up twice as much space as the green, which, remember I mentioned to you, we're less sensitive frequency-wise, so we don't need as many samples, and get the overall presentation of information, clarity or sharpness, with half the pixels. But a lot of people have complained that this creates artifacts, and that's why the term pen tile is normally mentioned as one of AMOLED's deficiencies, because one, they use half the resolution for the red and blue, and the green, as you can see here, is of a different shape. So these could create artifacts, and if you look at something in a VR headset, which is now magnified, this becomes more prominent. The earlier Oculus AMOLED screens was the same way. Actually, it was the S3, which was notorious for having even about this pen tile arrangement. So that gets back to where we're at now, and one of the things that is identified by the new, let's see, the new Note 7 as well as the S7, but actually it's gone all the way back to the S5 using this diamond. And notice the shape is different. first, the pattern is no longer consecutive red, green, blue, or in the case of Pentile, green, red, blue, green, red, blue, green, or I'm not saying that correctly, but essentially one green for every 2 red blues, or I'm sorry, other way around. So if you look at the shape here, it's better to visualize it. Notice you have twice as many green, and also they're smaller, so they can fit more into it. And then you have the red and blue, which are larger, but the shape of them is different. And what they have found is by changing the shape, making it more of a diamond pattern, they'll have less artifacts, less aliasing issues and things of that nature. And this really will play out when you hook this up in front of your eyes. Now, I've always thought, if you go back to the previous, let me jump back to it real quick, pixel arrangement shown in the CRT or the LCD, which is what the iPhones use because they're LCD based, that the clarity or the sharpness does appear to be better. But now that these new 25 by 60 screens, and actually been around for 2 or 3 years now as well, you get about the same sharpness. So I'm saying all that because DisplayMate just did their shootout of the latest. Oops, I have the Galaxy X7. They also did the Note. I brought up the wrong one. Well, yeah, they're similar, but the Note 7 is now considered the best display in this market for a smartphone, and it's going to be released on, I guess, August 19th, but I had a chance to go by Best Buy yesterday and actually see it in person. It is a very, very sharp screen. And again, as mentioned, a lot of people say, well, you've got this many pixels, you can't see it with the naked eye, you've exceeded that. But the thing that people need to remember is that people are going to be using their phones more and more in a VR perspective. So having a denser subpixel or pixel arrangement will be very important. And I think even though they don't have a section now on VR quality, they do talk about the diamond pixels in the S7, and as mentioned, DisplayMate just finished their shootout on the Note 7, and they say it is the best screen, not only in the sharpness, but the color gamut. Yeah, it also has a new HDR functionality. If you know, that's one of the big things now, 4K HDR movies. It has some processing for actually doing 4K on your screen. Even though it's a 25 by 60, you can still look at it from a 4K perspective. And I think it pretty much does away with a lot of what AMOLED screens were having issues with in the past. So I think that's a big thumbs up. And the other thing I wanted to point out is this will probably be the last year that Apple will be using LCD. But there's strong rumors that the new S7 and then the S7 Plus will use in the S7 a 1080p or 1920 by 1080 versus 1370, if I remember, which is basically 720p. They're going to jump up to 1080p, which gives you more resolution, and I think a 2K or 25 by 60 1440 in the Plus screen. So you're now going to see higher resolution in the Apple S7, but again, it's still LCD. But next year, they have a contract with Samsung to make their AMOLED screen, and more than likely, it will be the same diamond subpixel pattern.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So
recently
I
I went to at Costco. They had those Samsung quantum dot TVs that like they call it the 9 series, I guess. Huge. But I just couldn't. It just blew me away. It was like beyond 4K. I've never seen anything like that. I know probably the CES junkies are like, oh yeah, whatever. That was 2 years ago. That's old news. But they're like, you know, their consumer product now sold at Costco, and they're less money than we paid for plasma TVs. You know, maybe 10 years ago. And I mean, it's unbelievable that it looks like you're looking through a window. That's what it looks like when they're playing stuff. I mean, it looks like you're looking outside. It's so bright and vivid and clear. It's going to start to get hard to distinguish between what's real and what's not. So,
Well, it's really interesting. Not only do you have the higher definition 4K now that you're seeing more and more content, and obviously they run a bunch of promos at Costco and other places, but the other thing is a lot of materials now being shot at 60 frames per second. Now, some people feel that's unrealistic, but reality is it's more what we see in real life, yet it gives people too much of a hyper-realistic. In fact, if you remember the movie, the continuation of the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, that was also done in 60 frames per second. If you had the chance to see it at that, and a lot of people really didn't like it because it felt
yeah. I know some people at home. We had to turn that True View feature off at home because it annoys the crap out of us. Like watching stuff at 60 and it upscales and it doesn't do it right. But
there's the key, is that they're upscaling, and here I just found the link.
Yeah, but Netflix is doing it. Yeah, they're upscaling stuff that's not really even. The content's not. It's not 60 hertz. It was shot at 30 frames, but they're trying to upscale it. So
exactly. So it's interpolated, and which means they insert extra frames that wasn't there to begin with. And
which is crazy to me that the processor can even do that.
Yeah, we live in an interesting time. Okay, so here's this shootout. So if you want to go to it, DisplayMate is the de facto location to go to if you want to find out some information. They actually break it down in a very scientific method. They analyze a lot of screens. Another place that does great screen analysis is Anantech. So, but DisplayMate seems to be the people that you would go to determine how good your screen is. And one of the reasons for that is they run a lot of these tests. For instance, color gamut, which is this test here, shows, and Chris, you're familiar with this working in the printer, how well do you actually conform to the sRGB format. And here they show that it's nothing actually meets the full spectrum, but notice that the spectrum that the Note 5 is very, very close. Plus they have 4 different modes: an adaptive display, cinema mode, and notice how they modify the color gamut slightly.
I grew up doing color matching in a shop for screen printing, and this week we installed dye sub printer, brand new nice Japanese Muto, and I've gone through and done all this ICC profiling. We've got a little spectrophotometer. We do the profiling and all that. But when it comes down to this stuff, some of these changes are so subtle that the human eye, there's just no way to even discern the color. And really the only even device that can even interpret it is a computer. So like a lot of these numbers, at the human eye level, they don't even mean a whole lot, but they're, they mean something on the computer, I guess.
Well, yeah, because the sensor itself is more sensitive than the human eye, and when you plug that on the front of a monitor, or in the case, you probably have one that's opaque as well, so you can actually put it up against a printed sample and determine its color output. I did the same thing when I was working with the architectural firm that I mentioned some time ago. We did large plots and had to do the same thing. Plus the conformity that's required amongst 3 or 4 offices also required us to do calibration. But back to the screens, as you can see here, here's another look at the I'm not even going to pronounce it. Chromaticity. Jeez, sorry everybody. The color gamut. the chroma, or the color spectrum itself. Notice that again, even though it seems linear, it fully conforms within the boundaries of the sRGB color spectrum. And these are modes that are now available on most phones that you can switch to. So that means what you're seeing is going to be fairly color accurate. And the Note 7 seems to have that best screen. So it appears that Samsung is the screen to beat now, at least from DisplayMate's concern.
Well, when I was walking through Costco, they were definitely the screen to beat as far as displays, because they had, it was like everybody was hovered around the 9 series just going, wow. It's a $2,500 TV, but it was 80 inches, I think, or something like that. It was huge.
Yeah,
and it's in the middle of the store, and it looks like you're looking outside.
Well, to summarize again, when you're working in VR and you have these magnifying glasses in front of the screen, this is a possibility that you will actually see either artifacts or these subpixels themselves.
Yeah, I
As
remember
they get
there's
smaller, they become even more difficult, and I'm thinking, at least in some of the screens that I've seen now, like the latest S7 and hopefully the Note 7 I'll be able to do a review on soon. This density is very important to give the eye or fool the eye into believing it's a continuous image. And so I'm really looking forward
There's
to
actually a really
trying
cool
this out.
experiment you can do. You can just take your iPad or your iPhone or even any phone, any display. You know, you want to make sure it's glass on the top, like a smartphone, because you don't want to do this to your regular computer display. But lay it down flat, put go to the home menu, and then just drop one drop of water onto a little area that has color, and you can see it makes a little magnifying glass. There's an app that's like a color theory app, I remember, and it actually teaches you all about that. But you can just put a little drop of water, and you can actually see each little pixel. It's pretty neat to kind of see those things dance around and see what they do, you know.
Yeah, especially when you have a few things in your system. No. But yes, obviously you've created a little lens system by that drop of water, which allows you to magnify and see those subjects.
Well, it's 10:06, and we have a guest from Onshape.
Well, yeah, actually. So yeah, let's jump to him, and then we'll come back to the news items. Again, sorry, Noah, we kind of ran a little late on that. So Noah, why don't you join us, please, and kind of fill us in what Onshape is, and
Hey
then
there, everyone.
what are you? Hi. Kind of fill us in what Onshape is, first of all,
Sure,
and then kind of identify what your goal is to get this into the educational system, because I know that last year you just started, but obviously the program is free for some people, but I guess I should be quiet and let you talk now. Go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so Onshape really is the only professional full cloud CAD tool that's out there today. It's founded by the original team that created SolidWorks, which many of you that are in the CAD world have likely heard of. That original team split off from Dassault Systems, which bought SolidWorks many years ago, and started this new company with the idea of, hey, professional engineers and designers use CAD all the time, and they've been doing it more or less the same way since SolidWorks came out in the mid-90s. But since then, if you think about it, there's all sorts of new technologies. 3D printing is a big thing, and really democratizing how things are designed and made. But importantly to us, you have the internet has become obviously huge everywhere, mobile technologies, and of course cloud technologies. And if you look at most other types of software, there's some superior cloud analog out there today. Take Google Docs as compared to Microsoft Word. Take Salesforce and their CRMs for sales management, right? QuickBooks for finance. Really, all these sectors that used to be desktop install applications are moving towards the cloud, and there's good reason for that. The only industry that hasn't truly done that is the CAD industry, which is amazing to me at least, because my background's in mechanical engineering. I went to MIT for that, learned how to design there. And worked with a lot of people that were scattered all over the globe. We're constantly collaborating with people in Singapore or with colleagues in the UK. And really, if you think about how design works, you want it to be flexible. You want to get all these different people involved. That's how you get good ideas. That's how you get all the input. And really, that's how you make better products. And that's what's important at the end of the day. But the way that traditional CAD works doesn't really allow that flexible work style. Anything that's file-based, at the end of the day, requires that that file bounces between all these different people, and only one person can make those changes at a time. It doesn't matter if you're a CAD system that you install and it's truly a file-based system, or even some CAD systems that are partially on the cloud and sync to the cloud. It's really files at the end of the day. And I guess I'm getting a little technical, but the reason why this matters is because Onshape is fully in the cloud, and we use a database system, so you're just talking to the single source of truth. So with Onshape, I never have to download anything. I never have to install anything. It's like checking Google Docs. You log in, boom, there's all your documents. You open it up, okay, great, you're working on it right within your browser. You want to get somebody else's input, you share the document with them. They're in there at the same time. You can see each other working simultaneously, and Onshape really is exactly like that. In fact, I can pull it up here and even share my screen and show you that you truly can do simultaneous collaboration with CAD, which is something that's not possible with any other system out there today. Again, due to the architecture of how we built Onshape, the fact that it's fully in the cloud, database structure, it's utilizing new technologies in a way that CAD just really hasn't ever before.
Yeah, I mean, it's got like some features that even recently, I mean, I've been using it now for maybe, actually really using it for maybe 6 months. I mean, I've been a user since beta, which was like a year ago,
yep.
And I've just watched it evolve. The beauty of it is it's all cloud-based, and you have apps on the iPad and the iPhone and the Droids, and so if you have a touchscreen, they have apps. And it's still just the same cloud interface that you when you jump on your computer. I haven't actually tried it on a Raspberry Pi, but I'm fairly confident it probably works.
Anything with WebGL, really. So or iOS and Android apps. So that's another cool thing, right? Like, you don't need a big beefy computer to do professional CAD. And this isn't your little toy pull and making shapes. This is full parametric CAD used by real engineers and designers.
You don't need a $1,000 GPU in your computer.
That's right. In fact, we've got a video on our website of one of my colleagues, Neil, who bought a $200 Chromebook, and it takes him 10 minutes, 6 of which are just him unwrapping and unboxing it, and then 2 to 4 minutes of logging in and using Onshape and pulling up a huge assembly, right? So whether you're a school, so schools, it's huge because they don't need to buy these fancy desktops. They can use Macs, Chromebooks, iPads, whatever it is, and
all of the major nightmares of some of the other CAD packages, and I won't name any other names, but you know, 2 of the biggest nightmares. One of them is I mean, I've got a $5,000 computer that I built from scratch, right, and built exactly to their specs that they ask of every user to build. Okay, here's what you need. So you go out and you source all these super expensive components and you put them into a computer, and then, but you're constantly getting oh, you opened up too many web windows. You're getting these little performance notifications
crashes and you lose your work, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're losing your work.
Everything's saved all the time.
And then the number one nightmare in all CAD packages is the way that it manages files, and so when you want to move on to another version, you want to make sure that you didn't lose the version beforehand. And when you start working into like kind of assembly level type things where you have an assembly and you've got many parts, you can so easily break those links in other software.
And it's right. You're exactly right. And it's as simple as if you rename a file from what it was originally, now the assembly doesn't know where to look.
Or if you save a part and you lose your other one that you already had that was working and you messed it up, you can't go back. There's no going back unless you like go on your Carbonite or you go on your and you have to revert to some backup, and it's never an easy fix. So what I love is they have this kind of based on GitHub type thing or based on Git, this way of branching and merging files, which I've never seen before in any. And I wish that all software has this built in now. Because GitHub has it figured out, or Git, has it figured out. They've had it figured out for programming for years and years, right? This goes back, Linus Torvald, right? He's the grandfather of Linux. He's a grandfather of not only Linux, but also Git, right? I think he was the one that founded Git, which is how you commit branches and you merge branches of your programming. It's made so that if you're collaborating, right?
And for those not familiar, Git basically is a tool for software developers, and the way it works is you say, hey, I'm person number 1, and I've written some code. Hey, I'm person number 2, I took that same code and also wrote some stuff. And Git compares and looks to see what text exists here but not here, and is able to compare them and then merge them together. So it's very robust simply because you're looking at strings. And what's really interesting is that with Onshape, it's surprisingly similar. I don't know if any of our listeners have heard of Feature Script, but it's a kind of new thing that we've been keeping a secret since our birth, like 3.5 years ago, and it's something we recently announced, but essentially Onshape made its own programming language that our own developers use to write new Onshape features. Now, these features make up your parts and your part studios. So when you look at your 3D model, essentially that's a graphical representation of a bunch of code called feature script. And you can actually right-click any part studio tab and say show code and look at what made up your part. And so Onshape's branch and merge capabilities, it's literally doing what software developers do. It's looking at that feature script text, comparing text, and then letting you merge them together. And that's why it's so robust. It's because it's built on something that we've had at our core since our very birth. And that's
and
exactly
this might
why.
tap into a lot of the. This might actually tap into a lot of the people, because a lot of people use like OpenSCAD,
Yep.
which is a all math-based modeler, which is way over my head. Not way over my head, but you know, I don't use that as a tool, and I never would.
Right.
But some people do, and they love it. They all, you know, I was reading this white paper on these guys that have hacked. You know, it was a DEF CON paper. You know, DEF CON just happened last month, and these guys had figured out a way to 3D print, hack the Schlage keys for like prisons and things like that. Keys that are really hard, and they figured out some SCAD way to hack these keys and actually write a code where you just bling bling type in some numbers.
Yeah.
And so Onshape has this now, right?
Well, it's something similar. You got to keep in mind feature script is used to make new features, which is really neat because we have people that are good at coding and they go off and write the next latest and greatest extrude feature. Maybe that's a drastic example, but maybe it's a gear generator. So you can just say, I want a gear of this radius with this pitch, and then boom, you've got a gear. So people are doing the work for you, and you can go on our public library and get these new features.
And they make it a public file that you can then...
Public document, remember, no files.
Oh yeah, there's no files. That's the other thing.
That's right.
Everything's a database exchange. There's unlimited undos.
That's right. So
it blows my mind.
And I'll show some of our viewers exactly what we mean here. So here I've got a little claw built on some servos, and I was actually just making this pink part while you guys were talking. And what's neat about this is that if I want to get a teammate or a collaborator in on it, I just hit share, and I put in their email address. I define their level of permission, so I could make it so that person can only view, or maybe view and comment. But I've given myself up here, one of my other accounts, you'll see, edit and share access. And then over here in my other window, I've opened the same document. So here we're actually looking at the same document in real time. We pulled the data from the database. And you'll see actually, I can see that other people are in here. And if I click it, if I double click their icon, this is kind of similar to Google Docs, you view what the other person's looking at in real time. So notice I'm rotating the view of my right screen, and this person's following that person's view. So that's already pretty cool, but it gets even better because I could do things like, well, this guy, I'm going to leave a comment here and say, right-click, add comment, hey, can you change this claw shape? And over here, this guy sees a new comment. He's like, what claw are you talking about? So you click that, and it takes you to the same view that the other person was looking at the time of leaving the comment, which is pretty cool.
I didn't even know it did that.
Yeah, pretty neat stuff. So now I'm going to go in and edit the sketch. And, you know, maybe I'll make this kind of wacky for now. It'll be a pretty crazy looking claw, but this is fine with me. I'll say OK, and as soon as I do that and it updates, it'll actually update on my other screen in real time. So I don't know if you saw that, because it worked pretty quickly, but I'm getting true simultaneous collaboration between multiple users. And you know what, sure, I'm kind of simulating this on one computer, but this works as if the other window were on the other side of the world. You know, it's the same exact principle,
right.
Same exact technology.
So typically what you would do is you would either have your CAD package, and then you'd be working in like Citrix, like GoToMeeting, which is another paid for tool, which is like actually I think more expensive per month than even Onshape, but it has it all built in, and it's so if you're collaborating, I mean, I work with already countless people in Onshape doing this exact same thing every day, and I can't tell you, they don't have to come to my office. They don't have to drive over here. They just go, we talk on the phone, You know, I have my headphones in, we talk on the phone, and we just make the edits, and
Yep.
they're
And you know,
sitting
here's the thing too.
right then and there. If I make a change, they see it.
That's absolutely right. And to your point earlier, you never lose work. And that's something we're really proud of, is we're kind of encouraging creativity and encouraging you to just go and try new crazy things. Because here in your history, you see every single action ever taken in this document, and you can always restore to a previous point in time. In fact, you can even compare to a previous point in time. And this is kind of like that those Git tools we were talking about. But check this out. I could compare my current state to a past state and see what the differences were and how my design has evolved over time. Now this will load up here. This bar will let me slide between my two states. And on the left, it shows me the features. So in other words, here, I'm on my current state. And as I do this, I go back in time to what it looked like a few operations ago. This, coupled with the fact that everything's constantly saved after every action you do, and you can always restore to a previous point, means that you never have lost work. I could smash my computer with a hammer right now, hop over to somebody else's, and then boom, I'd be right where I left off.
Well, that could be the Sludge-O-Matic.
Yeah, maybe that's a new feature.
Yeah, and yeah, it's amazing stuff.
So Noah, what are you doing from, obviously the tool seems like it would be conducive to the Chromebook world, obviously, so that means this might have a great segue into an educational environment where Chromebooks seem to have really taken off, because one, from a system administrator or an IT perspective, they're great because you immediately can set them back to zero. I wish I had them when I was working as an IT director, but that obviously is all changed now, and this program looks like this would be great for that. So do you have any initiatives in the educational market
Absolutely.
that you've been working with? Can you
Sure. So I've been running Onshape's education program for about 1.5 years now, and we've seen it grow tremendously. A lot of it organically, and that's, you know, the real reasons why teachers and students are flocking to Onshape is kind of threefold. It's super accessible. It's free, which I'll mention soon. You don't need to download or install any software. And you have all this collaboration ability. So all these schools are already using things like Google Classroom, and they're used to working in the cloud, and they're used to having low IT on low performance computers. CAD's kind of, in fact, many schools that I talk to, they're getting rid of their old computers to make room for Fab Labs and 3D printers. So they literally don't have big desktop PCs anymore. So they don't know what to do about CAD. They don't have a solution. And a lot of them a lot of these teachers I talked to are like, wow, we found you just in time because we literally didn't know what we were going to do. We're just going to download STLs off Thingiverse and print those for a semester. So let me share my screen again and show exactly what we're doing in the education space.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Noah, is that yes, they spend their budgets on the hardware, and then they say, oh, beep.
That's right.
And obviously, well, maybe there's a correlation to when you actually released last year and the big 3D fabrication movement.
It very well could
be, right? So what do we have here?
So here is the Onshape homepage. Anybody can go there at onshape.com. And underneath Community, you'll see a whole education section. Now, this is a little mini site we made. And basically, the beginning of this year, we launched the Onshape Education Plan. Now, like you said, people don't really think about spending money on software. And we don't want teachers and students to spend money on Onshape. We think that it should be free to learn and use for students and teachers. So that's why we came up with the Education Plan. And in fact, it is essentially the same thing as Onshape Professional, what people pay $100 a month for, but again, free for students and teachers. And anyone can go to this onshape.com/edu and sign up for it right on this yellow button. Again, sign up is super easy. You just say, are you a student or a teacher? You give us some information, and boom, you get an email to activate your account, and then you're in. Again, no download, no install.
So what kind of proof does one require? And you know, is this only for universities, or is it also in the junior college market?
The only requirement really is that you're 13 years old or older, and that's for legal reasons beyond what we can control. But yeah, you just say your school, you put in your email address, you give us where your school's located, and then boom, you're in.
Now, does the
Now,
email address have to be an education?
It does not, in fact. It does not, in fact. So that's really cool, right? I mean, every student and teacher has free access to essentially Onshape Professional. I will mention that there is the only difference visibly is that you do get little education tags like this one has right here. So the documents are intended purely for academic use, so we don't want you using it commercially, or we don't want you cheating the system and try to use these documents for professional work. But if you truly are using it for academic, then we fully support you and think that you should be using it for free. And we've taken a step further and made these a number of resources available for educators and students. We've given everything and instructions on how to get started. We've got some lesson plans. And in fact, sneak peek, this coming Monday, we'll be releasing our new 12-week college curriculum. We've hired a professional engineer who also does CAD training, and we have an intern from MIT, and they've been working along with me to develop a full comprehensive 12-week curriculum for college-level students.
Wow.
Again, free, just on Google Drive. You'll be able to click a button right under lesson plans here and get access to it. And in fact, as a neat little treat...
So is there a way to go from academic then, like if you were a student, you learned and you did all your projects while you were learning, and you wanted to become a professional, can you then convert those documents? Is there a way to convert those documents? Like right now with my CAD package, I've had people come bring their docs to me, and they were tagged academic, and I had to go through my my VAR to get them converted to be non-academic.
Yeah, so I guess we're the type of company that's so young and agile and moving so quickly that we haven't gotten to that stage yet. But I'm sure that we'll hit there someday and we'll have a good answer. As of now, there's no mechanism, but I can tell you what, if a student that has just graduated and they've got a few models that they've gotten the education tag and they want to buy Onshape Pro, chances are we'd figure something out for them,
Right.
It's in both of our best interests. But having said that, it is truly meant to be for academic use. So if you're a student and planning on using Onshape for a startup or something like that, you might want to consider different options.
Yeah, or you can still sign up for an Onshape account and use it privately for professionally up to 10 documents for free.
That's right, and that's a good point too. You can have as many Onshape accounts as you want, really. So you could have one EDU account on your EDU email address, and then a regular free account on your own personal or business.
And you can share in between.
That's right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Well, Noah, I really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, we learned a little bit, and more importantly, because this is Edu Week, if I could talk properly, I'll educate myself to speak properly. Since this is Education Month here on 3D in Review, this week we have Noah from Onshape. Next week, should we say your competition, we're going to have a few people from Autodesk with the 123D series, which is another great free tools to get you started before you move into Onshape, but also we're going to have somebody from Fusion 360, which is the main competition. In fact, that is the program that I've been using. But always keeping my eye on Onshape, and as Chris has alluded to, he's actually jumped in with both feet, his head, his arms, everything into the Onshape. So I'm glad that you're looking at it from an educational perspective. As you said, most teachers don't realize that there's a cost, especially if they're just getting into this, let's say high school, even a junior high school program, and don't realize that CAD software has been extremely expensive in the past, and obviously hats off to you as well as Autodesk that we'll have on next week for really looking at this and providing the tools. So again, Noah, thank you, and it's always great, and hopefully we can have you on more often because
well, thanks for having me.
We always learn something when we have somebody on from Onshape. So thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Take care.
Move on.
Thank you so much, Noah.
You're welcome. Take care, guys.
Okay, well, I guess we're moving on. All right, so let's get right into the news items from the past. Hamido, however you want to pronounce it, has a new headset. So I'm going to immediately go into their little promo video. So like any good company who's trying to put out the next new version, obviously the Hamido VR system or headset is improved. It has a larger FOV or field of view. It is a larger body to fit larger phones. That was one of my complaints with the previous version. In fact, made some changes to the front plates so that it could use larger phones. But this particular version is larger, so you'll need to keep that in mind. But appeared to be more comfortable and has an actual capacitive switch now to be used with Google Cardboard, which was not the case in the past. And yeah, it looked actually kind of nice. I didn't get a chance to try it yet. They were out at Best Buy, and so I didn't get a chance to actually work with one, but I did get to see it. Like I said, it is larger, but it does look like it's better design. The only thing with a lot of these VR headsets, including the one that I'll be putting out, $79 for an HMD is a little pricey, puts it almost in the same range as the Google VR. I'm not Google VR, the Gear VR, but keep in mind the Gear VR is specifically made for Samsung phone. The Hamido is not, and they do have a suite of their own applications, as you saw there. So you can always jump out to their website, which is this one right here, to either buy it or, as mentioned, Best Buy will be carrying it both in the store as well as online. And I'm hoping eventually Amazon will also be carrying it. They may have an exclusive with Best Buy right now. So if you're still looking for a nice headset, I do recommend it. They've worked hand in hand with me, not only in helping support some of the modifications I did in order to create the very first, what do you want to call it, mobile positional tracking system, if you remember, with NeoDVR. And with this particular system here, I can only expect better functionality. And they're great people. They actually helped me with my VR Miracle back in December with their little small Hamido Mini, which is actually a great price of $15. So great people all around. So let's move on to another item that just made another announcement, and that's Vico VR. Remember, we had them on. We had Dmitry from Russia. And what they've done is taken the Connect technology and shrunk it down, kind of similar to another company, but also included an ARM-based processor in it so that you could use this as a positional tracker, kind of like the light towers we talked about with the HTC Vive.
Okay.
But like the Connect, it not only tracks a single position, but also can track your hands and arms, feed that information back into your phone, and allow you to move around in a space, as well as keep track of your hands. And they've obviously gotten a few more games that take advantage of that, and they also identify some events. They're going to be up in San Francisco on August 18th. So if you're in that area, Women in Diversity in Tech, they've been invited to actually show it off. But I have some surprise news, Chris.
Okay.
I joined the development group.
Oh.
And let's see, I will bring it up. And just the other week, I got my developer kit. Now, it's not as polished as the one that's there. That's not coming out until the end of the year. For those of you who signed up, I think it was their Kickstarter or Indiegogo, which was successfully funded. But this is the unit right here, Chris. Look, Chris. Chris.
Wow.
Can't hear you.
Wow.
You've lost your mic. Okay. Well, I'll keep talking then. But this
Are you there?
is the developer version of the Vico VR. It looks very similar to the early Connect. It does have a tripod mount, but more importantly, on the back, which separates it, there's a power as well as a firmware adjust. But other than that, this is fully Bluetooth controlled. As a developer, I received their Unity as well as their Unreal and Android development kit. So I look forward to putting together a demo to try out next week.
So does that have the new Intel in it?
Which allows me to utilize something that's going to be very similar to what the HTC Vive is popular with, but I can do it with my own little phone, any phone for that matter. So, Chris,
Does it have
did you figure out your sound yet?
Yeah, I'm showing green on my end, so I think it's your ears.
Is it me, maybe? No. Hello?
Hello. Check,
Okay.
check, 1, 2. Yeah.
Maybe it was me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, is that the new Intel in there?
No, it's not. It's basically
It's their own system.
Microsoft Connect type technology or structured light technology.
Got it.
So, and I'm a little confused on that because if you remember, the structured light technology was done or made by a company or introduced by a company called PrimeSense, which was licensed by Microsoft to create the Connect One. And obviously, as you know, with my involvement with the structure sensor over the last couple of years, it's the same technology there. So to see it in this product, and there's a couple of other companies that are using something like that, I'm a little confused on how they're going about. Maybe Apple's still licensing this, I don't know. Or maybe have no idea, but essentially that's what it consists of. And if you remember in our interview, he alluded to it being similar technology. What makes this different is that this is a self-contained computer. And let me jump back to this is a self-contained computer with a Connect type technology over Bluetooth. So there's no wires. You just hook up a power supply. In fact, this runs on 5 volts, so you could supply a 5 volt and make your whole system portable. So this would be kind of cool in a hotel or a meeting room or a conference room where you have the space and then you can create an area to interact in. So the difference between this and the system that I've been working with the structure sensor is that the sensor is external and it tracks you within a confined space, where the structure sensor, which is mounted to your head, creates relative positioning based upon real-time tracking of your environment and feeds that back in. But you do not have multiple points of tracking. The other cool thing about the Vico VR is that it will allow you to track more than one person. So you could have 2 people interacting with their headsets and it'll provide positioning information to them.
Wow.
So let's go back to the website. So there you go. And then there's, you can click on their link. As mentioned, they were fully funded on Indiegogo, but you can pre-order, and I think it's like $200, $250. So it's very reasonably priced as well. As I mentioned, I will have this up and running next week in my little space and run a camera on me so you can actually see me in my little VR world. See, I'm never going to have to leave my little cave again, ever. I can go anywhere I want, walk anywhere, interact anywhere. Yes. Okay. So that's about it for the items of the past. What's going on in the news today, Chris?
Well, this came. This is a couple weeks old. Actually, I think it is a couple months old, but we've been taking a couple months off, and I wanted to make sure our users. I know we've covered. We've showed some different ways to do full color 3D printing. We've covered that. We've had the guys from Mosaic, obviously, where they are mixing colors for 3D on the 3D printer before it goes filament style. We've had hydrographic printing, where they print onto like a hydrographics setup, and it computationally figures out where it is and applies that graphic. But there was an interesting one that Disney's been working on, and I wanted to show that. And it's based on a technical paper called Computational Thermoforming by Christian Schuller, Danielle Panzano, Anselm Grudhofer, Henning Zimmer, Evgeny Sorkiny, and Olga Sorkin-Hornung. I don't know if I'm saying those right, but there's a video I have on YouTube here, and I think you can just pull it up.
You want me to pull it up?
Are you seeing it here?
I'm not seeing on your end, so yeah, I can pull it up real quick.
there it is. And so thermoforming, obviously, really common for manufacturing. You know, they use thermoforming for all kinds of stuff. And they basically press a thin piece of plastic or even thick piece of plastic over. So here they are. They print the master mold out of PLA. Then they pour in, you know, like a lightweight gypsum. And then they melt it away with a heat gun. Really smart. To get their master thermoform mold. So that's the thermoform mold. Then they run a simulation process or a simulation on the computer to generate a full color
with the proper geometric
with the distortions. Yeah, with the distortions, they thermoform it and they can get precise color exactly where they want it on a thermoform model. And so here they are simulating the 25,000 triangle mesh here, and they're showing the deformities on the computer. They calculate the deformities, and they generate the picture. So here they are. They're generating a couple other, and obviously you got to get it lined up right. So they have a process here. So it looks like they're doing dye sub. They're doing dye sub onto a picture onto a. So that's dye sublimation. So what they do is they sublimate onto a carrier sheet, and then they heat transfer it onto a plastic.
Transfer it over to the plastic. Very cool.
So that's dye sub.
And you actually have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I do a lot of that. We do a lot of it using it for textiles mostly. And then, so this will show off, this is just showing off some of the cool things that they're able to do and how realistic, photorealism, this is a lot cleaner result, obviously, than you're able to get with that So here it is showing a packaging, you know. So, you know, it's very promising for packaging. Obviously, they've been doing this for years for packaging, but you have to hand calculate it.
Yep.
Or it was a trial and error thing. So they'd set up their mold, and then the graphic artist would go. So here they can actually run a computational analysis. Right now it's theoretical, and it's based on these computational thermoforming paper, and they're running it through actually like a Microsoft cloud cluster to compute all this stuff. But it's only a matter of time before they make this an actual. So here's comparing three different methods: hydrographics, the Z Corp if you're going to print it, and then their method. And I think their method just looks more vivid and obviously just a lot more clean, because it's going to be a lot more lightweight than a full, you know.
Yeah, and if you remember,
I mean, they can probably hammer out a lot of this. So once they get this figured out, this could really revolutionize like product development or full color kind of printing, that kind of thing.
Well, that's super cool. And if you remember, we talked about this on several occasions. A couple of products on Indiegogo or Kickstarter, if I remember, that have little smaller thermoformed type devices. So I could see this being utilized with that and being like a plug-in for Photoshop or something like that.
That's right.
Where you bring in your image, it runs this computational plug-in on it, immediately print it out, either sublim or maybe even a inkjet that, and then transfer that over, because you know they have that transfer paper, and immediately bring that over and use a press like that. So, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Even more reasons to go get one of those. Just
yeah, one of those thermoform machines. So I've been, you know, hunting eBay. Obviously, they have gigantic thermoform machines you can get on there. I just want to build like a small one and start experimenting with it. I've always loved the idea of thermoforming. I think it's cool. You don't use very much material. You can still make prototyped models, and it's a trade that's starting to like come back in a big way. There was a few at the Maker Faire, some manufacturers. The units are still fairly expensive for what it is, because it's really just hot air and a vacuum, and you just suck it down. So you can build your own, obviously, for cheap, but then there's some kind of engineered ones that are way nicer, but they're still fairly expensive. But I think the cost is going to come down soon.
Well, like I said, there's a couple on Kickstarter and Indiegogo that seem fairly reasonable, so, and a smaller bed. So if you did want to experiment, maybe a direction to go. Okay, so on to my next item. Back to our education this month, our 3D education. It appears that Julio, and I'll play the little video here if it'll play. Yeah. Can you see that, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially this little printer here, or this program, has a curriculum and files so that a school system can use their 3D printer to print another 3D printer, which I think is pretty cool. But more importantly, it's based on the STEM process in order to get this into schools. And not only will a child or a person in the educational system be able to use 3D printing, but learn how they actually work by building their own. And they have several kits, which I'll scroll. Now I'll let it play through.
Julio. It's a 3D printed printer. It reminds me of Emiglio. There was do you remember Emiglio? It was like a little robot in the 1980s that you could have, and it was like a little remote controlled robot, and it had a tray, and on the remote you could actually talk into the thing, and it would distort your voice, and you would talk through the robot. So you could go bring a drink to your mom and be like, "Hey mom, here is a drink." Really fun little robot. I think my brother had one. Emiglio, Julio. It just reminded me of that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so the perks or features, $299 gets you a basic early bird kit for an estimated March 2017. Sadly, that already takes you to the almost end of next school year. So introducing it now and only releasing it next year may work against them. However, what this kit provides is the components. Here they actually tell you one basic kit, complete hardware and electronics. Remember, a 3D printer has some electronics, servos, or actually stepper motors, a heater. That probably can't be 3D printed very well in plastic. So you have that kit and then all the STL files to build all the plastic parts. So it's pretty neat. I don't know. Do you think the pricing is a little high?
Seems high to me, especially since it's just STL file. You already have to have a printer if you're going to buy the basic kit. You have to have a printer to print one, or you have to know somebody with a printer. So it might be a good project, but I don't know. I don't know much about the people. It's kind of always risky, and it looks like at least they have stuff already there.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously
they already have some geometry build. I mean, it looks like they're already building some of these things.
Yeah, and it looks like they've already created the STL files for it, but more importantly, if it's STEM-based, they have probably written a curriculum up so that essentially you could buy their package and immediately go to town on introducing this. As I said, the only thing that concerns me is that, you know, they're introducing that at the beginning of the school year, yet you won't actually get one to the end of the school year, which I think they are kind of 6 months behind. They should have introduced it in December so that it could be available in August, because as we know, most of these projects never reach maturity when they say they're going to reach maturity at time of arrival. So the kit would include all the electronics and mechanical components, as you can see there. And then the frame and everything else is what's 3D fabricated. So it looks kind of neat, and obviously in different colors it was printed in. Here, there's a whole bunch of them. So obviously they've done this for some time. And then there's your parts. And then printing a tree frog. So I think it's neat, but as mentioned, let's see, was there an educator price? School edition. So what do you get as a school? You get a school, one complete hardware set, one complete electronic set, all the STA, one CAD book. Okay, so for $499, you get the whole school system. Yeah, to me, I think probably the better bet would have been to maybe like $100 $150 set that included just the components, or maybe even like a $50 kit that had the curriculum and a build of materials so that the school could go out and buy all the components and the STL. But I mean, I guess everybody has to get paid for their work. Oh well, they're currently at $641, 5 backers. They've got 2 months left. They're out of Canada, so if you're interested in supporting them, you know, as I said, the only thing that kind of bothers me is that this won't be coming out to March, which doesn't make a lot of sense because all they're having to do is acquire the components. They're not having to actually build this again. So I don't know. Makes me question a little bit. So we'll probably look at this again later on. All right, next item, Chris.
Well, we have a filament here from 3ders.org, a story of a new filament. You know, hunted through, and this one caught my eye. This is FilaOne. It's a gray carbon nanotube 3D printer filament that supports 1,000 times its own weight during an amazing strength test. It's a regular filament that can print. FilaOne Gray prints at 220, which is like lower than nylon or ABS. And it's a carbon nanotube filling, which can significantly strengthen any 3D printed part. CNTs are large molecules of pure carbon that have the benefit of being stronger and lighter than steel, while also being efficient conductors of electricity and heat. I don't know what it'll do to my hot end, but I kind of want to get some of this. But their 100-gram spool costs $199. But you can check it out at Avante Technologies website, which we'll pull that up. So proforma-3dprinting-store.myshopify.com, and they've got it. And I don't know what the warping characteristics are.
Well, I would suggest that you're on a podcast / YouTube and you would like to demo and review it.
Yeah. Well, I gotta do a little research. Here they are. They're showing. Let's see what. Gray samples. This is for samples. Let's see what their filaments are. Gray high performance. Here we go. So it looks like it has a little bit of, it doesn't print super clean, but they're saying that it's really strong stuff. And they've got a demo video here of it, a torture test. So here they are, they drill through it and bend it back and forth, which is kind of a, and they're doing a 7-pound weight, saying 1,000 times its own weight, and it doesn't crack. I mean, that's, I don't know. We'll have to, yeah, like you said, maybe we'll have to demo it.
Yep. Well,
but I'm always leery of the carbon fiber or carbon impregnated materials. They say they do a lot of damage to your hot end, so you just need to be careful, especially if you're going to do them on a printer that's not yours. You don't mess up. You don't want to mess up a printer that's not yours. I mean, be considerate of other people that might be using the same machine as you. You don't want to widen the orifices.
Yeah.
The
don't
orifice.
Go to your maker space. I want to use this carbon material and leave it.
Yeah. Don't widen out the nozzle. Yeah. That's not kosher. We don't recommend that.
Yeah. And again, the other thing is, at least my experience, that some materials actually start clogging the feed, and the feed pulley or the knurled edges. So don't know, but we'll see about getting some, because if that strength is, as you said, that could be very important, at least for prototyping. All right, I'm going to move on to my next item, which is actually, whoops, wrong item. Jeez, we should fire that producer. There's 3D design and architecture, but in this case, we're going to be looking at how virtual reality is going to be the architect's best friend. And let's jump to that. You know, I've been talking about this for some time. In fact, over 10 years ago, I worked with as I've said numerous times, a multidisciplinary firm, and we actually set up a visualization department or area that we did 3D visualizations of the architectural work for public safety systems, as well as what do you want to call it, full-blown projects. And we even bought at that time an eMegan VR system, which is nothing like what you have now. But it was a start. It was about $800, and you essentially could use this in gaming systems. But let's move forward about 10 years, and you can see there the person has the HTC Vive on in the hand unit, but they're able to create, let's see, where's the article at? Okay, well, you have the show notes up on your end?
Yes, I do.
Why don't you see if you can bring it up? Obviously, they're flagging me to subscribe. And if you can't do it, then we're just going to drop the story, because I'm not going to support a group that it immediately drops you out because...
No.
However, I will give my own anecdotes on this. Essentially, with Unity or even Unreal Engine, you can now drop in a lot of the components, and some of them even have exporting plugins to take what you've done in, let's say, Revit or some other architectural or planning or application, and bring in your entire environment or project into a gaming engine, and then allow you with the VR tools to be able to walk around or be immersed in it and give a person a better perspective. Something else that isn't mentioned here that I've been working with as well is creating cube maps or sphericals, projected images from your actual application. Now, the problem with that is they're static, so you can't move around. So you would need something like this, a gaming engine that would give you the ability to move around within the environment. And I don't know if you remember me showing it some time ago, but I had exported or converted one of the Unreal demos called Sun Temple to Gear VR as well as Google VR. And some of the shaders for marble and metals look so realistic. The fact that you could move around in it and think that you're in a realistic environment really shows me the potential. In fact, this illustration, were you able to bring it up, Chris?
No.
Okay. All right. So we'll forget about, but this illustration here, I guess this is in San Antonio. So it's some type of, looks like a church or religious assembly building that they're looking at here. But one thing that I notice is that it's still somewhat, as I call it, gamified. There really isn't a lot of realistic shading or occlusions. Ambient occlusion could probably have been added to this. There seems to be some faint shading. But I've noticed that a lot of these don't have that extra realistic quality that you're now starting to find in the latest versions of Unity and Unreal by providing, as we talked about from like 3D Coat, these new environmental shaders. So we're probably going to start seeing that more and be able to use that in a mobile, or at least, let's say with the HTC Vive or even your Oculus, the ability to really feel like you're in an environment and be able to walk around in it or move around like you're in a wheelchair or one of those. What was the name of that device that was promoted towards senior citizens? Those little like golf course, like scooters. I don't know. There was a name for it. They had them on late night advertising. But give you the ability to move around and actually interact with an environment that doesn't exist yet. And, you know, I've been a big proponent of this, and one of the reasons I'm in VR is to be able to model and create something that you can look at without actually having to reproduce it as a tangible object will really save money, and more importantly, allow you to iterate without actually having to spend time on physical products until that point. So you can do a lot more refinement than what has been possible in the past. And from a medical perspective, even more potential of looking at CTs, MRIs, and things like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. All right, Chris, on to your next item.
Well, this is HP. Bolsters blended reality by acquiring the 3D scanning company or firm David. So David Scanners, you might know, has been around and kind of a staple for kind of in the scanning community. Kind of one of the highest rated scanners is their newest product, the Rev 3 David scanner. Has kind of a pretty good reputation for a laser scanner. I'm still on the fence about this whole scanning thing. Going from scan to actual data you can use to print, there's just not a real clean, easy way to do it yet. So, but David has some good options. They're, $2,000 to $3,000 range will get you started with a David scanner. But HP has acquired them. So in as of July 6th, I believe it is.
Yeah, that's a little bit of old news, but like you said, it was during our summer hiatus.
So, between HP, they are putting money into this whole HP Sprout thing. HP released their 3D printing line. It looks like they're moving forward, whether we like it or not, trying to really put a lot of eggs in this basket of 3D scanning, 3D printing. Who knows? The next HP Sprout might just have a David scanner built in.
Yeah, or actually produce one that can. But as you mentioned, and you've got a little $100 unit that you've been playing with behind, which looks a lot like. Remember that one that I sent you the parts that we never really got working?
Yeah, this one, the software is. I'm using Horus. You can see the scanner behind me in the box here. We'll talk about that another Printwhisperer week when I actually have the thing with some decent scans. The scans that have been coming off this, they look all right. When they get into the computer, everything looks okay. But then going from that data, the point cloud data, and actually getting it into normals and making a mesh out of it, that's a challenge. So, there's a kind of a learning curve there. You got to use MeshLab or you got to use some tools to then take your scan data and make it, there's some low-cost options out there, and who knows, they might actually catch up to these more expensive ones pretty soon, because most of it has to do with software.
Exactly, and more is coming out in that area. So, okay, let's move on to the next item. Speaking of 3D fabrication, our good friends over in North Korea is promoting the fact that they're using 3D fabrication to create bones and dental implants. As in this article from 3dprint.com. I don't know. I'm only bringing this up because I think it would be kind of scary to go to North Korea to get dental implants with something that looks an awful lot like earlier version of a MakerBot. Don't know. We've talked about using Formlabs and can't even talk. SLA printing. In fact, you remember we had Dr. Dan Kopp on to kind of talk about using SLA for dentistry, and because of its, I wouldn't say better precision, but at least the smoothness and the accuracy of the prints with an SLA can be pretty good. The problem is a lot of SLA materials are still toxic, especially in the consumer world, using like the Form 1 and the Form 2. So many of them use CNC mills, and our test showed that the CNC mill was still much faster, and actually it was more expensive, but it was faster and the materials used were cheaper. But here, this article, and there's a little video, and I jumped right to it on their news, where the guy's actually talking about utilizing what appears to be a MakerBot type knockoff And it's funny, looks like Lenovo laptops from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I wanted to bring this up because obviously they promoted this in news and 3dprint.com is showing it. And I don't know if we're really trying to show how advanced North Korea is in creating medical 3D fabricated stuff. But I just think that if that is the extent of their progress, I don't really think the North Korean government system is really the direction to go for forward-thinking technology progress. But at the same time, I guess they're trying to show that they've been making some progress. If you remember, maybe right before we went on summer, we had a little clip of the fabrication show in North Korea, and they showed a bunch of these MakerBot type clones. So I thought that's kind of funny. So again, I don't think I'm going to be getting any bones or teeth implants from North Korea, but who knows? Maybe they have a good price. I don't know. Maybe we can get some STL files so we can do our own on our own MakerBot. I don't know. All right. Well, enough making fun of the North Koreans. Obviously.
Yeah, come on, Mike.
We should be happy they're making some progress.
Yeah, and just because they're different, you know, they're people too. I mean, the thing is remember, governments are not the citizens of a country.
Well, and that's a very good point, Chris. And the whole point.
I mean, you just look around where we live. You know, the other countries, the way they look at us is similar to North Korea. I mean, we might as well be the same as North Korea in a lot of ways. Because the government obviously does not represent the people anymore. But we could go on and on about this. So, well, should we get into the Printwhisperer back to school special? Well,
I guess so. So, well, actually, let's bring up a little bit more very quickly some of the other items in the VR section, and then we'll jump right into it. A couple items. One, if you're interested in getting a very compact spherical camera system that is stereo, and the important thing with stereo is that's what gives you the 3D illusion, because it has one for each eye. They have this product coming out called Meet 2 Eyes VR, which is a very compact little camera system using 4K imagers. It is going to be announced. It's not even on, I think it's either Indiegogo or Kickstarter, but there's some images of it. It will contain a Qualcomm processor and a 1,240 milliamp battery, so it is self-contained and portable, and probably can run over Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And then another item is this article, which I was going to spend a little bit more time in, but maybe next week. I think that is pronounced Dialotus. Some people obviously have confused it with another name, but it's a actual kind of eyewear, glasses. There's been a lot of talk about it. I did some math on it. It looks like it uses like 1.5 inch little AMOLED panels for each eye with about an 800 ppi. Lenses right up against it are very close to it, so there's your actual thickness. So the lenses look to be about 38-40 millimeters, and then the panels are right behind it. Supposedly has a huge 105 or 103, I think 105 FOV. It says in here somewhere like that. But the thing that everybody who had an opportunity to try it on complained about is because they styled it like glassware, and this version doesn't actually show the extra, what do you want to call it, visor protection to block out light, they wouldn't stay on people's faces, and especially European structured faces. So they kept falling off. So that seemed to be the major complaint. And I have recommended, if you remember, we covered something from eMegan that looked more like little steampunk glasses with a band behind it. So maybe that they'll add that to it. But the actual image quality looked pretty good. However, as you're aware of, the ecosystem has not been put in place. There's rumors of an actual additional smartphone type viewer, but my experiences with mobile phones, or at least earlier mobile phones, is that the actual VR experience is not the same as an Oculus or an HTC Vive. But they do say that you'll be able to hook it up to it, but no more information was given on it. So even though it might be a great little product, it's supposed to be released, I think, about October. And there's rumors it was going to be a Kickstarter or pre-ordered. I'm a little concerned because this thing has been talked about in 3D renders and it shows since last June of 2015. So I'm very leery and wanting to pursue this personally. It's going to be about $560. So it's not much cheaper than an Oculus with no actual ecosystem to back it. Even though it might look cool, if you can't run any cool stuff on it, it's kind of useless. Okay, so let's move on to the Printwhisperer.
All right, back to school week number 2. The kids here are not back to school yet, but we're back to school. We're back to podcasting, and we want to get you everything you need as far as information. We want to share as much as we can to getting you a 3D printer at school. So how to find a printer, how to sell your idea of a 3D printer to get one in the classroom. So how do you do it this week? Last week, we talked about finding the right person in your school, usually a passionate science shop teacher type person, computer lab person, perfect place to have a 3D printer. Last week, we talked about that, finding the right person, because that's who you got to get in with. And you want to get your parents rallied up behind you, backing you up on how important it is to get these tools in your classroom. And so you want to get as many facts as you can to make it happen, obviously. And, you know, a special Printwhisperer note is if mom says no, ask dad, duh, and don't take no for an answer. So this is business 101 is, you know, if one teacher tells you, no, it's not possible, the principal says, no, it's not possible, it's not going to happen, that's not good enough, because 3D printing is obviously the future for manufacturing, medicine, automation, food, and everything. All right. So robotics, the future workforce revolves around technology sectors like this, especially where we live, California, anywhere in the US, really. If you want to participate in the future, you've got to have access to the tools of the future, and 3D printing is definitely part of it. So, you know, if these people are not behind you and they're, you know, they think that learning about, you know, cave paintings is more important than 3D printing, then they definitely, they definitely, you know, not saying that learning about cave paintings isn't important, because maybe it is, but it's definitely not as important as looking for the future. Looking at the past is fine, and learning history is fine. You need to know what's going to happen in the future by learning history. But if you really want to learn about the present, you need to learn. You need to have the tools. So they're doing you a big disservice if they're denying you access to a 3D printer. So what you need to do is you need to come up with a case on why you need one. And I wanted to touch on it last week. If your school's not going to do it and they just aren't going to make it happen, and you've tried your hardest, then you need to go outside of school, or maybe you need to find a different school. So, you know, I mean, if your school isn't, if you're demanding something that your school isn't giving you as far as education, then maybe it's not the right school. And, you know, homeschooling is definitely an option for some people. You know, some people, one of their parents might not work, and so homeschooling is definitely an option nowadays. I kind of have some beef with our educational system, public educational system here in California, especially. They're implementing all these things that are just super dangerous to the student. So homeschooling is becoming more and more of kind of a way to navigate education now, and it's contrary to most of the myths around homeschooling. Is all of the homeschool kids that I know are super successful now that were going to homeschool while I was stuck in the classroom, You know, here they are. They have 3 hours per day dedicated to, which is really, when you think about it, if you really were to distill down how much time you're actually learning in a classroom environment and how unpersonalized it is, how much time are you actually studying at school? What, like an hour, 2 hours maybe of actual learning? So 3 hours of curriculum per day when you're getting homeschooled, and you get to pretty much choose like an hour of your day is dedicated to whatever you want. So there's lots of options out there. So don't just try to, don't feel like you're backed into a corner just yet. If your school's not giving you the tools, then you need to argue why you need the tools. There's also maker spaces. So like here we have maker spaces around us. They're popping up everywhere. Get in touch with them. Also check out meetup.com. Again, like Noah alluded to with the Onshape, is you do have to be 13 or over to kind of participate in some of these online social networks. You need to be 13 or older. But the next thing you need is you need to find out how much it's going to cost to get a printer, and you also need to find out which printer you want, right? Because there's a million of them out there now. So some places I like to look, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite places. There's this one called Aniwa.
Yeah. Let me interrupt just for a moment, Chris. So, you know, if we remain in the public school systems, keep in mind that there are the parent associations, and as we know them as the PTA. That's also a place that you could address this. Sometimes they can either run their own little campaigns, bake sales, or whatever, in order to raise the funds for it. That's happening. What is it? There are Montessori schools that you can be involved with if you, or private schools if the public school system isn't working either, and you still want that ability to, what do you want to have that public, or not public, the social organization that plus or minus schools can provide depending on what school system you're in. So totally agree with you. Homeschooling can be a great thing. Some of these other alternative schoolings can be a great thing. Go to your PTA or your parents association. And if you are a student or a young person listening to our show, obviously the Printwhisperer can help you out. All right.
Yeah, and we're happy to help any way we can. You can reach out to us through our All Things 3D channel, and you can ask us questions. We'll try to get back to you as best as we can. But I wanted to share some resources on how to find the printer that you want within your budget. So one of the websites that I have pulled up here is, you want to switch to my screen, Mike? And okay, just making sure. And Aniwa.com does a meta list of the best 3D printers this year, 2016. You can scroll down here, and I recommend the Printwhisperer's tip is stick with FFF and FDM to start. The SLA printers are great for certain applications, but most applications and ease of use and cost for schools, FFF just can't be beat. So this is the best 3D printers as according to Aniwa.com. This is their list. This is the Lulzbot Taz 5 won out this year, even though the Taz 6 is now my favorite. I've got a little Taz 6 and it just goes. Then they rated number 2 as a Zortrax. So you just find a list here. The CNC Rostock Max V2, also a really nice printer for not that much money for the build envelope, right? The meta rating of 8.8 and for $1,000. But you got to watch out. Some of these, some instruction, some assembly required. In fact, the CNC Rostock V2, all assembly is required. It is a bare bones kit, and you have to put the whole thing together. It's a fun project if you have time and you have a lot of technical expertise. I've built a couple of these now, and they're real fun to put together, but I also have quite a bit of experience putting this kind of thing together now. The Lulzbot Mini is about, you know, a little over half as much as the big dog Lulzbot Taz. And the Lulzbot Mini actually can print almost anything you want right out of the box. It's about a 5-minute setup, and very, very nice printer. And you could just go down the list and find out what your budget is. Like, you know, how much money do you think you can raise? and how much are your parents going to shell out? There's also this 3D printing guide from Make. They do a shootout every year. They have a special Make magazine edition once a year that does a 3D printer shootout. And then any of the new printers that kind of get released, most of them, they make supplemental write-ups throughout the year. This year, TAS 5 won out again on the top of their list for FDM. I actually really like the Ultimaker 2 as well. I think is a really polished machine. And then, of course, they have everything in between. Here's a PrinterBot Play for $3.99. I've seen them. I've met them. The BukidoBot, highly reputable machine. A lot of these machines, the PrinterBot Simple, $600. So let's say you have 60 students that have access to it. That's $10 of lab, $10 lab fee, right? And then you can. So what you really want to do is you want to get probably your computer lab guy or even your shop teacher together, get them brainstorming, and you might even be able to find a local company that wants to sponsor this kind of thing. So, you know, for Parts Oven here, I know I like to hear from the people with robotics clubs around and try to sponsor them if I can. And so that's kind of the tip of the day, is to find the printer you want, because obviously you won't be able to raise money if you don't know how much you need to raise and if you don't have a goal in mind. So you need to have a goal. And so that's kind of the
excellent
that's kind of the goal. And next week we're going to talk about finding that money.
Mm-hmm.
So you've dedicated, now you've set your goal and you've set a budget of what you need. And then next week we're going to talk about where you can go to actually get the money.
Yep. Lemonade stand. So back to it. You mentioned two great sources. Make Magazine does their shootout every year. The thing that I found surprising is that the number of, what do you want to call it, manufactured printers. I noticed that none of the ones from China, even though I think Dremel is just rebadged. What was the name? I can't think of their names. I didn't notice any Chinese brands, and I do know that some of those are halfway decent and very reasonable in price. More importantly, the Dremel is completely assembled. It's basically a plug and play, and I have heard good things about that. Some of these others, as you alluded to, they might be great and low and inexpensive, but would they survive the rigors of a full year of curriculum or more? Obviously, at $2,000, you might want to push that past 1 year's worth of education. So will they be able to withstand the rigors? Will you be able to replace components early on? And even though the Luzbot looks like it's expensive, in the long run, I think, as you have found out, Chris, there's a lot behind the scenes that actually makes an extremely affordable printer. Well, gosh, if you've got a moment, I'm going to talk about something that I missed last week. If you remember, were you on the show when I brought up the latest OSVR HDK-2, Chris? Do you remember that? No, I think you dropped out. So essentially, I got the new OSVR HDK-2 in, which is a headset, and OSVR is for open source VR, and it sells for, what's the price on it? I think it's $399, so it's $100 more than the previous, but it uses essentially all the same technology as the Oculus. And that's what I wanted to go through really quick, is compare, and I'll go ahead and bring it up, the latest, and here's an image that I took, of the circuit board in the brand new HDK-2 and how it compares to the other two major players in the VR world. As you can see that this board, I can compare it really quick to the previous board, uses, and it appears they all use a similar chip. If you see this chip right in the middle here, that's kind of on its side like a diamond, this particular chip is a Toshiba HDMI to MIPI converter chip, which is necessary to drive these LCD panels. And then they have the Atmel chip. Down here they have a USB chip. These are all needed in order to allow the sensors, because this one uses sensors, emitters, just like the Oculus, to drive it for positional tracking with a little camera, and also has some features the others two don't, which is a header for USB 3, as well as a plug-in jack, so you can actually support like the Leap Motion and other products directly on this unit. So it's more of a hobbyist type thing. Here's the other side that makes this, again, very similar to the Oculus. It uses two dual 3.81 AMOLED was it 1080 by 1200, so altogether 2160 by 1200, just like the Oculus and the HTC Vive. The big difference, though, is it's 3.81, where the panels in the Oculus are 3.5. So what does that difference do for you? It improves the PPI. You get a higher PPI with the Oculus versus this, but what you could get, if done properly, is a better FOV because the whole panel structure is larger. So there are some compromises. I did find when in viewing this that you could see the subpixels. As you know, that's what we started off the show with. So that creates, as we know, the screen door effect, which was notorious in the previous Oculus devices. And since you own the Oculus CV, and you remember having, was it the DK1 originally?
Yep.
What were your thoughts? I mean, is the screen pretty good now?
Oh, it's incredible. It's yeah. I mean,
Yeah, so
I haven't spent much time in it, especially like lately at all. But I have a game I got maybe a couple weeks ago that I haven't even played it yet. It's called Chronos. That's supposed to be getting really good reviews. So, and there's already quite a bit of content, which is really nice. It's really, I feel like it's it's so content driven now. Like there's so many, we've been waiting for it. And it's like, it's here. And there's a whole landslide more of stuff coming. I mean, with PlayStation, the new PlayStation they're saying is coming September 7th. So there's a whole bunch of VR. I mean, it's really, we're right at the cusp of where, but yeah, it's here. The display, there's not really, I can't really complain. It's only going to get better and better. It's basically like where 1080 was, or when we got Blu-ray a few years ago, is it's high definition. It looks great, but you know that there's going to be improvements on it, and you know it's going to be 4K next year. So,
well,
I have no complaints about it, though. I mean, as far as quality, it feels like you're immersed. If there's you can't see the pixels really, unless you're really trying to focus in on the pixels, but it doesn't take away from your experience at all.
Well, one of the things that was also pointed out, and I actually magnified the screens on all these, is that they use as we talked about, a pentile subpixel. So the sharpness would not be the same as the RGB, or even using the diamond technology as we showed there. In fact, I'd have to go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure that those little panels in yours, which are made by Samsung, are not diamond. So we can see some improvement from the subpixel. But I did notice with the OSVR, those panels, even though they're dual, they're still at 90 hertz frame rate. So you can get the performance as far as the low persistence and latency of the other two. They are a little larger, and the pixels are a little bit more apparent, but I think that might also have to do with them using the same lens systems in the previous version, which are just sharp. And in fact, the Fresnel actually works better because it kind of smooths out some of that subpixel distortion, or I don't even call it distortion, but the fact is that you don't have a really dense pixel. And that may still take some time. What I see happening is that we may see denser panels, but still being driven at 1080p, or in the case the 2160 by 1200, we could double the actual pixel density in order to smooth that out, but still keep a lower resolution. Because jumping, as they're saying right now, 90 frames per second at even 2160 by 1200 requires a lot of horsepower. So going to a 4K screen, which what did they say is 8 times, 4 times the performance, and then you have to double X, so it's 8 times. Really can be. I mean, there really isn't a system that can handle it at this particular point. So you're seeing the latest, but as many things, it will evolve, especially if people still start clamoring for better stuff. So let's move on to what the CV board looks like compared to, now again, I'll remind, here's the actual HDK-2, fairly large board. The whole unit is still fairly heavy. And then here is the CV board. Like half the size, pretty much the same components. This one uses the same HDMI to MIPI Toshiba chip, uses the same IMU. They're both by Bosch, and some of the Atmel, I think there's a very similar coprocessor or ARM chip as what's on that. So very, very similar, except it's about like half the size. And part of that might be because the HDK-2 is more for experimentation, so there's more accessibility. Like I said, there's a header for a USB 3, unlike the board from the Oculus. But this helps keep the weight down. If you notice, the Oculus CV is fairly lightweight and comfortable. I felt that the HDK-2 is about twice the weight. And then if you go to the HTC Vive, which is this here, again, a little bit larger, and it appears to have some larger chips on it as well, and that could be because it's also processing the, I wouldn't say emitters, or not emitters, the receptors. If you remember, the HTC Vive uses that light tower technology, so it has to process all those little receptors in order to produce a physical location in space based upon those laser tracking systems. So that's all self-contained on this system here. Another unusual thing is that there's actually an audio port, it looks like, built onto this. So this is the board. So as you can see, and this one does not use a Bosch IMU. I think this is an Invensense, IMU. Some people feel that that is less accurate, but maybe it's not required as much because of the better tracking capability with the light towers. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time in this. It seemed to work out okay for me. The actual panels, I don't have pictures of them for the HTC Vive, are 3.6. So the PPI is a little bit less than the Oculus CV, but still very close. Still a dual panel system. So from an electronic perspective, all of these are about the same. And from a visual standpoint, they're all about the same. So what's going to be the main point in any of these? It'll be content, and Steam VR is working out very well. Oculus has gotten a lot of complaints on being closed, but they've kind of opened up a little bit more. If you buy their software, you could use it with your HTC Vive. So we're starting to see less grouping of software for a particular device. And then, as you just mentioned, we've got the Sony, which supposedly is only going to be a single panel, not dual, running at 120 hertz, which is going to be interesting because one of the reasons why these companies have gone to dual panels is because they are smaller, and physically having smaller panels is what allows you to run them at a higher refresh rate. Larger panels, it makes it more difficult. In fact, if you remember, the original, or the DK2, only ran at 75 hertz because of the fact it was a larger panel. So I don't know what Sony has done. It's maybe a proprietary board. The other fact is it's only a 1080p screen. But again, 1080p, which is 1920 versus 2160, that's not that much difference as far as pixel functionality. But you do lose a few in that center segment, as you can see here, since these are physically both 1080 across. The center area, which gets lost, which is like 50 pixels, you don't lose. The other cool thing, not on this, these are fixed, but on the Oculus, you actually separate those two panels based upon the IPD. That won't be the case in the Sony unit. So it'll be essentially a 1080p or 1920 by 1080 screen running at about 120 hertz refresh. So it'll be a little less quality. But the other thing that I heard is that that panel will be a RGB subpixel arrangement versus a pentile, so it may be actually as sharp as the previous. Some people think that it isn't, but again, it's not out yet, so we will find out if it can compete with the other two. So that's about the roundup of what's going on inside of them. They're all pretty much the same now. Okay, that's about it for the show. I was going to go through some of the items in the calendars, but there really isn't anything until September, so we'll skip that.
Awesome.
So
well, thanks again to Noah from Onshape for joining us, challenging us even more. I learn every day in Onshape. Go check it out, onshape.com, and we will see you next week on All Things 3D.
Yep. And keep in mind that we'll have all the links that Chris talked about. So if you want to do your own comparison and buy your 3D printer, that will be in the show notes as well in YouTube. On that, bye, Chris.
Bye.